Alrighty, what's up, guys? I'm here with Brandon Harris. I will give no intro at all. I will let him do all of that. So let's hear it. Who are you, Brandon Harris?
Man, brother, that's a hard question, right? Because I feel like, so much of that is a story we tell ourselves. So it's a combination of real stuff and stuff that I've made up in my own head. But not to get too philosophical on this podcast, right? But
Go wherever you want. So who do you see yourself as, and from that side, and then what would maybe someone else see you as? So we could split it up into two. What are you from a professional standpoint?
there you go. Yeah, I'm a coach, and I've been doing that for almost 20 years. So something I'm very grateful for and love doing. So yeah, professionally, I'm a coach.
What made you get into this field?
I think as most people that are in the field, I mean, you not to speak for you, but it seems to be in my experience that a lot of people get into coaching or training because they love helping people, and it's something that I have been fascinated with and curious with for the majority of my life, and really have dedicated a good chunk of my life to trying to understand and become better at. So for me, as an athlete in my younger years, and then moving past that point in my life, I guess it was a way for me to stay involved in athletics, and it was a way for me to connect with that side, that the physicality, the physical side of myself, and has kind of changed and evolved over the years of working in the industry. So yeah.
So where'd you start off when you were just getting into the industry?
So I was originally I wanted to play baseball in college, and that didn't work. That didn't work out. So I had an academic scholarship at ASU, studied kinesiology there, and started in the industry first with an internship with Exos, which is now, or excuse me, at the time was Athletes Performance, and now is Exos. And then I was a personal trainer, which I think is slightly different than a coach. While personal trainers can be coaches, I think those are slightly different professions. But I worked at a main gym, at a big box gym. So started as a personal trainer at a 24-hour fitness, and then a Lifetime Fitness, and then opened my own space, or worked as a contractor for a little bit, and then opened my own space.
And is that what you're currently doing?
Yeah, so I've
That's your
owned.
own space?
It is, yeah. I own Premier Fitness Systems with one partner, and we are now in business for 13 years. So we've had the actual physical space for 13 years.
Wow, that's awesome. Um, it's funny because a lot of us get into the industry like, I just want to help people, and then so we get into all this training stuff, and then before you know it, we go from all we want to do is train athletes, all we want to do is help people, and then we're at a big box gym helping adults, parents, people just who want to get healthier, lose some body fat, get in shape. So is that the main reason why you opened your own space, because you wanted to go back to training athletes and kind of get back to the original reason you got into the industry? Because I know now. So now, who's the main population or the main demographic that you train?
Myself personally is mostly athletes, but our gym itself, the gym has everyone from high level professional athletes to your everyday Joe. I'd say the majority is still the everyday Joe, because the professional athletes, baseball is a specific time frame. Fighters that's a very unique subset in itself. Um, but opening the gym, I mean, I think really we had this idea that we wanted to do something different, and we wanted to do it bigger. And you don't really know what owning a business is going to entail. I think you have a general idea, and then you get into it and you're like, holy shit, there's a lot more that goes into this than just being good as a coach or a trainer. So that's it. I feel like that's its own conversation, is the trials and tribulations of owning a business when if you're a small business owner, you're doing everything. You're the marketer, you're running payroll, you're making sure there's trash bags, right? It can become very tedious to where you actually aren't doing what you love to do. So for anybody out there that's looking to start a business, I think those are things you want to really consider. But yeah, getting into it, not necessarily. I was never the person that said I wanted to train professional athletes. It just happened, and I think for me, it's always been more about working with people that are really dedicated to getting better. And even to this point in my career, if I have a stay-at-home mom that accepts coaching, I'm good. It really is for me having people in my schedule and in my life that embrace being coached and want to grow. That's what I love. And it just so happens that professional athletes do make up a big piece of that, because ultimately that's their goal, right? There's a very objective goal with a professional athlete of being their best. And I think in the general population that might not always be the case.
Yeah, that's my exact scenario too, where I am in a wrestling club. All I want to do is train the best wrestlers, and then it turned into all I want to do is train anybody who's dedicated and will give me the attention and will let me coach them to the fullest of my ability. So that's turned into adults. Turned into other athletes. That's turned into siblings who don't even play any sports. And it is just about completely buying in to the plan and the system. So I had the same exact thing go on here. Getting back to the business side, I feel exactly the same way. Where when I was a trainer, I got to learn so much more because my off time was spent just learning. I was learning, training. That was really it. Where now I have to cover so many of the other details to make sure that the training sessions go as best as they can, that they're filled and that they're packed. And then I can get into, more the learning side. So there's just so much more to cover before you know it, you're back at the sessions and you're doing sessions. So it's sessions, it's covering all the other sides of a business, and then it's back to learning. So it can be difficult to kind of sneak that stuff back in there. What have what have you scheduled out and planned out and made yourself keep continuing education? Is there a specific reason? Did you have a certain problem? Or is this something that's just extremely important to you? Because I see all of your stuff with PRI, the Bill Hartman stuff, and getting into all of that. That, for me, started with all of my pain that I couldn't really figure out. And then I helped a lot of wrestlers and grapplers do all of that. And then it just made me want to dig more and more and more. Is there anything specific that got you into that side, or you just came across it and started loving it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm very similar. For me, looking back, there was a definitive point in my career where I realized that I no longer wanted to be stagnant, and I think there was, a period where probably early enough where I was still naive that I thought I knew it all, right? And then you realize the more you know, the less you know, and you just become curious. Curiosity uh, as a principle, as a state that you're trying to cultivate in everything, I think is really powerful for somebody in their life. So there was that I realized early on, that if I'm seeking out things that I'm interested in and I'm curious about, my quality of life is better. I'm getting up with a purpose, and always trying to come from a place of how do I help the people that are in front of me. I still ask that question every day. And I feel like the more I know, again, I'm like, man, there is not one right answer. There are better thought out answers, right? There are more intelligent answers, but there's not necessarily a right answer. And then on top of that, I had pain as well. So I dealt with chronic back issues from the time I was really 14 till the last time when it was really bad, was probably about 10 years ago, where I had my back completely went out, and I was told I needed surgery. I saw the top sports medicine person here in the Valley in Phoenix, and they said you have degeneration, you have herniations, and all three, cervical, thoracic, and lumbar, and you're a candidate for surgery. And I've never been the type of person um, to just trust that, or just to say, okay, I'm going to jump into surgery. I've never had surgery. I don't take medication unless it's necessary. So for me, it was like I wanted to dig into that more. And that led me down a path of what is going on and why, because nobody could tell me that. And that led to more of a movement based approach. So I spent a lot of time in, say, the Ido Portal camp, the body weight gymnastics camp. That led to FRC, which was mobility. And at that point, this was, it's funny to think about how, go back, I don't know how long ago that was, not that long, where mobility exercises became this craze. And then to PRI, which from my experience was, it's the only system that really made sense to me, that like, okay, this is the real deal. Like how you breathe, how you pressurize, it makes sense and it works. And then that was PRI to Bill Hartman, and right, where I think he has just branched off of the PRI model and just happens to be kind of a mad scientist in that respect. So it just makes a ton of sense to me. And now fast forward, 8 years ago when I had that last blowout on my back, I'm doing pretty dang good. In my 40s, I'm stronger than I've ever been. I feel like I move better. I haven't had an issue with my back outside of small little, muscle things from, say, deadlifting heavy, but I'm doing pretty good. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely a combination. You and I seem to be on the same page with that, of just being constantly curious, and then dealing with my own things really led me down a path to understand it better.
And now, so understanding those approaches, for me at least, is so important for those wrestlers and grapplers who always have something come up. Like, while there's probably more injuries in other sports where on the field something goes terribly wrong and you have to cart them off, or they just have to completely stop for a bunch of time. Wrestlers and grapplers are just always getting little injuries and little things that just constantly hurt. They're never going to get off the mat. So for me, it's been so helpful to just go through progressions and regressions based on, whatever may be needed. And then you could sprinkle in all the movement based stuff, and it's just been extremely helpful. And they like it. So, you know, I'm something I haven't been doing well. It was a goal of mine to do way more meditation this year, and I haven't been doing it. So, what is the link between all of the meditation practice that I see you do, and then the breath from a PRI standpoint? So, like, I see it in exhale, and I see drawing a rib cage, down. I see, uh, pressurizing a system from that standpoint. But I know for you, the inhales, the exhales, all of that stuff is going to be maybe a little different. Is that right? Am I on the right track here? It's not just a biomechanical standpoint for you.
Yeah, so biomechanical positions, right? Positional breathing, using the diaphragm, creating correct pressure strategy, and being able to see somebody's shape and how they move, and starting to see certain patterns, right? And that's what you're talking about, is that you have a great understanding of, and that's the mechanical piece. The other side is, it is biochemical, right? So you think of blood gases, O2, oxygen, and CO2. So somebody's tolerance to CO2, their efficiency at moving oxygen and absorbing oxygen. So there's all of these connections into somebody's conditioning, and the mind, which are all interwoven. So I think the mind, to me, is the really interesting part. and that if somebody doesn't have the ability to regulate their nervous system and to get out of a stress state, they're going to have problems. They're going to run into problems. And you look at certain sports and you look at the population in general, most people are kind of chronically stressed out. And you look at screens, you look at the phones. So right there, if you can teach somebody to down regulate their nervous system, not only do we have a skill that works in between uh, lifting bouts. So you do a heavy set of deadlifts and the nervous system is being stressed, and then you're teaching the athlete to come down so that they're more efficient when they do it again. You're also training the ability to recover more from a macro perspective. So is somebody actually recovering after a training bout so that they can come back the next day and train more efficiently? And then probably on over the top of that is just somebody's relationship to their mind. How well do they focus? Can they concentrate on something? Those things are very valuable.
Yeah, I the conditioning standpoint for me is something that I've seen more and more and more. I was at EIWA's yesterday and watching all the wrestlers there, and I try to look at it from like a binary standpoint of, I call it like, you have your turbo boost, and that's, maybe what someone else would call like anaerobic conditioning or whatever it is. And it's like, this is where I squeeze my muscles, this is where I start burning carbs, this is where I start just going at it, and you only got so much. So what I've tried to do for a lot of wrestlers is like use more of a breathe through your nose more, relax more, see if we can do more conditioning from a relaxed standpoint. And again, that's what came to mind when you said being able to recover between bouts, being able to recover, between sets in the gym, whatever it is. If we can get back down to more of a relaxed state, it's only going to help us so much more. So I see it as like, if we can, do more while we're relaxed, so more of like a true aerobic conditioning, then we could use that turbo boost when we need to, and you'll have way more. So let's get more into the mind side, though. What is going on at the mind? Maybe it's not as simple as like, when you exhale, this happens. When you inhale, that happens. A mouth inhale versus a nasal inhale. I've heard tongue on the roof of your mouth versus tongue to the bottom of your mouth. What's going on at your mind at all of these things?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, when you inhale, heart rate increases. When you exhale, heart rate decreases, right? That's kind of the general idea. And a big piece of the exhale is connected with the vagus nerve. So, and that's going to be connected with your parasympathetic. So I think you look at, like, if somebody is kind of chronically stressed out, they're going to be doing, just like you look at shape and you start to see characteristics and you start to be able to say, well, this guy's probably going to be better at squatting. This guy's going to probably be better at hinging based off of shape and based off of pressure strategies. I think you start to see the same kind of patterns in somebody's breathing. And you see if somebody over breathes, they probably tend to be a little bit more, kind of strung tight. And that can be good when you look at a sport like wrestling, or you look at a sport, really any sport. I think the ability to upregulate and to go is important, but not if somebody is stuck there. So again, we're looking to give people the flexibility to go up when needed and to come back down so that they don't stay stuck there, so that when they want to turbocharge again, they're more efficient. And the other piece of this is your ability to see and recognize of what's going on in your mind, right? Which comes from meditation. Meditation is really just training your concentration and being aware of the inner voice, being aware of the narrative. So if you have a wrestler that is getting ready for a big match, I think a lot of times people just push away their fear, right? They won't accept it, and then that creates issues. Like that creates uh, a mind that's attaching to certain ideas. So with meditation, with breath work, you can train people to be aware of those narratives and see them as just a narrative, not attached to them, and simply come back to being present. And in that state, you're more likely to be efficient. That's a flow state, right? You're more likely to be able to find that flow and really do what you've trained to do without your mind getting in the way, which is extremely, extremely powerful for anybody that's competing, is to actually be able to, in competition, utilize what you've been training for without getting in your own way.
Perfect sense to me. When especially that's a way more thought out version of what I would say. I see the best athletes in the weight room and on the wrestling mat. Their ability to go from just relaxed to competitive and then back down to relaxed is unbelievable, right? They're not high strung all the time. They're generally kind of relaxed, but when it's time to go, they go. Mm-hmm. And the other quality is that they can kind of attack any challenge much better than the others. Yeah. For me, I'm an overthinker when it comes to this stuff, where if I'm in the weight room, I probably won't hit any crazy PRs out of nowhere. Where I see some of our best athletes will just put some weight on the bar sometimes, ask me, hey, do you think it's okay? And I kind of give them a shrug, and they attack it and they crush it. And that's such an impressive quality to me that I see from all the best athletes. And it makes sense from what you're saying. They get into this competitive flow state from wherever they are. They use their turbo and they crush it. What are some of the qualities that you're seeing from your highest performers?
I'll echo what you said. I think at the very top, you see the ability to just be, to really flow with the experience and match the demand and not waste energy when it's unnecessary. I mean, as you were speaking, it made me think of watching the UFC last night and Bo Nickel, who I don't know personally, but obviously is an extremely decorated wrestler. And I know I work with people that know him personally, but he's calm. He got in there, did his thing at the end. You could tell that his adrenaline was running, but in the interview, he was fairly calm. And I think the important thing there, or one of the important things there, is that the athlete is authentic to themselves, because that will present itself differently. That in some people will present itself more upbeat, right? And in some people, it'll present itself way more calm. But the frequency really should match the individual. So what I mean by that is at its root, call it mindfulness, call its focus, is really developing more of an authentic relationship with it. And at that point, with that cultivation, the athlete, I think, is more likely to be able to perform up to their ability, because it's authentic, right? It's their flow. They're not trying to be anyone else, which is again something that is cultivated when you practice meditation. It's at its root, I think it's an intimacy with the self. So again, somewhat philosophical, but there's a lot of correlation there as I see it.
It's so interesting how we can see that from others, like right away. We could see when someone's being authentic. We could see when it's organic, when it's just who they are. That this is that swag. It's easy. It's so funny how we don't really know the best words and we can't quantify it that well, but everyone agrees. Everyone gets it. Everyone knows the best athletes just have that swagger about them. That's, you can't disguise that. That's just it. And you got it or you don't. So getting back into more the biomechanics side, when you're working with your athletes and you're showing them all this stuff, are are there some that are extremely into it? Are there some that will kind of not like that stuff as much, or do they really? It kind of works itself out where the guys who like it, the guys who like your system, the guys who like your culture are automatically just going to stick with you and get great results. And then the ones that don't really fit in, they don't really stay around. Or is it more, do you change your approach a little bit when that happens? So I don't know, not a perfectly worded answer, perfectly worded question, but do you know what I mean? Where for me, we have a certain culture here that I've seen guys come and go, and it seems that everyone's a really good fit, and that's just because the people who are a good fit stick around, and it works out that way. Is everyone that trains at your gym into the movement stuff, into meditation, into that whole side? Is that something they trust you with? What's your approach there when you get someone who's maybe not as into it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I know exactly what you're saying, and I'm trying to think of how to break this down. Um, so to start, I'd say because our gym has a certain brand, I think we are more likely to get people that are open to it. And then let's just say my personal brand, that's a part of my gym, but it's the higher human, that side. If somebody's reaching out to me through that channel, most likely they're very open to it. Now, I think it's great because you're starting to see this become more mainstream. You're starting to see, I mean, Sugar, working with Sugar Sean, that's a huge piece of that for me because he embraces that. So that's huge. People that are fans of the sport and see him, see Israel, see a lot of guys at the top talking about breath work and talking about mindset, and they're cultivating that in their training. I think goes a long way in other people being open to it. Um, so there's that. There definitely is a subset of people that isn't ready for it or that doesn't get it. And I think it's something that's really hard to get, especially when you're younger, because you haven't probably gone through the same um, trials, if you will, to have gained the perspective to understand why you should close your eyes and breathe. It's like, why do I need that? I need to just why yeah, I'm an athlete, I'm a beast. Why am I not just training hard? It's hard to have that perspective. So I feel like part of the art of it is understanding the pieces of the athlete. So where are they coming from? What's their perspective? What do they think about quality technique? Do they think it matters? I try to listen and really listen from an open space to understand a person before I start. And if I get a feel that let's just say I have an athlete that really needs it, but they're not quite there, I'm going to be patient in presenting it. And I find that if we're looking at, let's just say, let's not, well, let's take like a down reg, PRI, like really like the starting point of breathing. What I'll do is I'll integrate some type of interval. So let's just say you put somebody on the assault bike, you have them push, and then the goal is for them to get their heart rate down, to a certain number. And you teach that person how to do that, which is basically, I just want you to take long, slow exhales. And they might be doing it not very efficient. They might be butchering it, but I'll just let them do it. And then I'll get their perspective. Like, what did they feel? What did they notice? Have they ever done that before? And I find with that kind of approach, you can get at the end result, the goal, sometimes quicker than say, putting somebody on their back and have them do 90-90 breathing, and they just really have no idea why the heck they're doing it. So I understand your question perfect, but I think it is a kind of a complicated, nuanced, answer. I guess it depends, right? So I don't know if that made sense, but Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, I would start everybody with breath awareness. Like I would start there, and I think of that as even before conscious breathing or PRI breathing. So let's just say you have breath awareness, which is just basically just be aware of your breath, more meditative, be aware of where your mind goes, and then come back, like just feel the breath. And then conscious breathing to me is the next step where you're actually starting to control it, and you have tempos and you have counts that you're searching for. And within that is positional breathing, or call it PRI breathing, which I think requires a certain amount of awareness to even be able to work with efficiently.
Yeah. And for me, I start everyone hook line breathing, hands on the ribs, and try to use as many references as possible. So that makes a lot of sense. The awareness of the breath. So I went through like the Sam Harris, the his what's called Waking Up, and that was unbelievable. It was amazing to get a course in this whole thing that was very long and detailed, but just enough with what I wanted, and it's helped so much in getting back, I guess, more present and more mindful of what's going on. Is that where you recommend people start with like a waking up course or whatever it is?
Yeah, I did the same thing. I mean, and that's funny. I did Sam Harris. I did Waking Up, and I meditated for his. I mean, his app has changed significantly. I actually was just on it yesterday. I'm like, man, there's so much material there now. It almost, to me, it's overwhelming because there's so much. But that's a great place. So when I did it, I'm not sure if it was the same for you, but it was almost more. There just was a, I don't know if it was a 60-day, your goal was to meditate, to practice mindfulness for like 60 days in a row or something like that.
Like 5 chapters of work or something like that. And yeah, I got the same exact feel. It was so amazing having the course and just going into my app. This is, the 5-10 minute meditation. This is the 5-10 minutes of maybe like more introspective thinking. And then that's it. I didn't think about, what else I was going to look at. And now it's like you could pick your own type of meditation, the daily meditation. There's way more on it. And honestly, that's probably made it harder for me to start doing it. It's it's very interesting that you said that. Cause like, yeah, I guess that's kind of exactly how I feel.
I mean, you think of as an athlete, the goal is to be present, right? The goal is to be right there. If you're a wrestler, you're an MMA fighter, you're a baseball player. I mean, the athletes know that. They understand that the the better they are at being present, the better likely they are to succeed. But most people don't connect meditation to that, as that's a way of cultivating it, right? And again, I think you can think of not even meditation, but awareness as a practice that you're constantly cultivating, and then you can find in every moment. Here, right now, me with you, I'm trying to be aware of our conversation, right? I'm trying to pay attention to you. When I drive my car to work, I'm trying to, I need to be paying attention to what I'm doing, right? So that I don't get in an accident. If I'm having dinner with my girlfriend, I'm trying to be present with her. Like, to me, it's a skill that nothing negative comes from. It's a skill that you develop, and I think it's important to say skill because that resonates with athletes. It's a skill you have to practice to develop skill, and it doesn't. There's nothing negative that comes from cultivating presence in your life. With that perspective, everything you do can enhance your performance as an athlete, right? If you're looking at being present, if you're looking at paying attention, if you're looking at focus, right? If you make that connection, um, it makes more sense, I think, for an athlete to practice it, right? Because if the goal is to be the best in the world at something, and you realize, like, man, yeah, if I'm training focus, when I'm in a conversation with somebody, when I am, really doing anything, and I'm helping myself get better at my sport. I think that's pretty powerful. And that doesn't mean you don't check out either, right? That doesn't mean there's not a time and a place to put on a TV show and veg. Like, I don't think we need to be 100% locked into everything we do. It's important to understand that as well. But yeah, I think the best in the world they have they have an innate ability to be present, and they cultivate it.
Do you believe that as a society we're really all getting worse at being present? Is that really what's going on, or has that been a buzz for the past 20 years? With all the social media going on and a million distractions everywhere, is is that really, a downward trend? Are we really getting worse at being present, or has that been the buzz forever?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if you look at just the phone, and it's this amazing tool, but it really is designed, and most of it is designed. Apps are designed to pull your attention, to keep you, to keep you locked in. The phone escalates that issue 100%. I mean, and then you look at let's just say social media, which we met on Instagram, so it's positive, right? There's aspects of it that are really cool. Like, I every day I look at something on Instagram and I learn from. I mean, I'm looking at your posts and I'm learning from them, but it's designed to rob you of your presence and to pull you in and to judge yourself. I mean, think we make a post and how many likes do we get? We're basically judging ourselves based off of likes. So I think it has gotten exponentially worse. So I think we need to, as coaches, I think it's important to cultivate that in our clients and our athletes of, um, learning to pay attention, learning to tune in, and be more disciplined with that, because you're going to use your phone, you're going to pick up your phone and you're going to use it. So I think it's more about it's more about the being disciplined and not allowing the device itself to constantly rob us of our presence.
About wrestling, martial arts, you have to be locked in. You have to give your full focus to a practice or something. Not I was a baseball player, so not to talk bad about baseball or other sports, but there's no resting in this sport when you're doing it. And that's why you see some of the best wrestlers, you know, they're sleeping at tournaments, and they'll wake up, they get back in, their mind back in it, and they go and crush it on the mat. So it's great how there's such a good pairing going at martial arts, because if you're not in it, you're gonna get hurt. And you've seen that, like, more. Uh, are people in martial arts more interested in this stuff? Is that a common thing? Do they go hand in hand for a reason? Why are the cultures intertwined? More than maybe a football. Baseball makes sense to me, like in a bat or a pitcher or something like that. But just true moments of, like, they're short and there's obviously not as many, but extreme amount of focus and mindfulness.
It's probably the root in more Eastern Eastern culture, Eastern philosophy as a martial artist, right? Majority of the martial arts that we see are from a more of an Eastern culture, and meditation, mindfulness is probably more of a piece of their culture than ours as a Western society. I'm not a historian in that, but just from a macro perspective, that seems to make more sense. That when you look at certain aspects of, um, Buddhism, that meditation is such a big piece. That's where they're coming from. So I think in the martial arts, when you're looking at all of those traditions, it's more rooted in it. I mean, you think of Bruce Lee. I feel like everybody loves Bruce Lee, and such a big part of his philosophy was also cultivating presence and mindfulness, and I think, yeah, you just see that very rooted in the Western dominance, the Western dominant sports. Probably not as big of a piece, but it is, right. I imagine if you went back and you were able to interview all of the greats in, let's just say, football, and you really got to break down some barriers and some walls, and they were honest, there was probably a piece of their practice that was very meditative.
So just like anything else, do you feel like the better athletes are automatically better at this mindfulness practice?
I guess it probably depends on how athletically gifted they are. That's where I would go with that, because I think you can be, if you're really really gifted, you get away with more, and that you could say the same thing about um, lifting, right? It's like somebody that's just really really good and genetically gifted, they can get away with more in the gym. Not to say that that won't hurt them down the line, but I think at the top of the top, there is, if all things are equal, and they never are, but if they were, the person that is better at being present would 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 stand a better chance to win. I do believe that, and I think you'd see that across every sport. Is that, if again, if everybody was equally as strong and their conditioning was the same and their skill was the same, then you would have that the skill of being present, and of letting their what they've cultivated actually come out. That's the skill of focus. That's the skill of presence. So
It's almost like developing a sense of efficiency, using what you need when you need it.
yeah, it's definitely a skill. And if all things aren't equal, so if somebody is better at tuning in, at focusing, I just think they're giving themselves a better chance of succeeding.
Where do you think you can have an influence on more like the high school college population? What do you see it has been, your main audience? Where can we bring this influence to them? You're a much a bigger name than I am, and a more influential piece, and maybe just hearing from another voice would be helpful to them. Why do they need to start some practice, and where can they start? What should they start doing?
Well, I think when you look at people that are in this sport, that have achieved a high level of success, and if they're talking about it, I think that carries a ton of weight. So it's like, if they're in MMA, you look at, again, Sugar to me is a great example. I'm biased because I work with him, he's my guy, but to me, that's one of the greatest skills that he possesses, is his ability to be present, his ability to stay calm, his ability to not let the moment be too big, and trust the process. And you see other guys in the MMA community talking about that. We said it earlier, but it's like Israel talks about it. Um, if we're talking specific wrestlers, I'm sure there are people in the wrestling community that have talked about it. So I think when you hear greats, or you hear people that are people that the youth looks up to, and those athletes are speaking on it, that's obviously really powerful. And I imagine, in, say, the wrestling world, there are people that talk about it. I mean, I work with Bryce Meredith, who's was a two-time um, runner-up national champ, and he has a fight in Bellator coming up, and he gets it. He's all about. So yeah, I think through Sugar. Yeah, so you have that space where you have. I mean, these guys have trained at the MMA lab that's here in Scottsdale. It's a great gym, and you just get guys that I think are looking for something a little bit different, and are looking to grab an edge. And I mean, to me, it's one of those spaces that it's one of those things. It is kind of a low hanging fruit, that specifically to breathing, right? Like, I mean, we can go back in that direction of just breathing and not necessarily looking at it from the mindset perspective, but how you breathe, how you use your diaphragm, how efficient you are at dealing with with oxygen and CO2 and blood gases. I mean, that's a big low hanging fruit, right? I really think it is. It might be the lowest, like the lowest of the low. Like if somebody is not doing that, that can change things fairly quick.
Right. It's just straight efficiency. It's like how much the breath plays a role in physiology is ridiculous. And it's not even, it's barely even looked at. For some reason, it's so much like, all right, you're doing breathing techniques to meditate, or you're doing, or that's really it. Like the world, I don't really think has come close to seeing what goes on, with ribcage, pelvis position, with all this stuff when the breath is when the breath is integrated. The example I always give is like just exhale and use that as your gas pedal. Like there's a reason that in karate we've seen the noises made as that maximum amount of force is being produced, or like a tennis swing. Like try to inhale and swing as hard as you can. It's not going to happen. It's impossible. So I think like trying to relate that, and then it's like, oh, okay, now I'll try this when I squat or floor press or something like that. And now I see a little bit more. If I can just floor press a few more reps, then oh wow, there's something here. And from there, then it's like, all right, that's some buy-in. Now let's keep going. Wow, what can the breath really give me? You give him 10 good breaths in a hook line position. Wow, I could squat butt to heels without even thinking now. I just feel looser. I feel more lax. What's going on here? Is there a special thing you like to do for buy-in? I know we spoke about it before. Is there a process that you have? I know some coaches are very big into like you need to pass this exercise before you go to that exercise. What is your process for bringing the breath in? I know we spoke about it. We touched on it with like find their goals and relate it to that. But is there something that you try to start with, because that'll just develop more buy-in, and then hopefully they'll understand its importance.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I'm going a little bit away from that, but not necessarily, is if you get somebody on the table and you test their, let's say their hip IR, and they're limited, and then you do some down regulation breathing and their IR increases. I mean, that to me, you definitely get buy-in from that, right? Because you're picking up range of motion with just simply the breath.
Getting away from it.
What's that?
So why are you starting to get away from the table test stuff? I know that's our new thing in our little niche in our fitness industry world that I think 99.99% of people won't get. And I think it's funny how it's become like a bad thing. But so I do want to hear your take. Like, why are you getting away from, hey, here's your shoulder IR, it's 30 degrees. Here's 5 exhales, boom, it's at 70.
Yeah, no, I think what I was intending by that was getting away from, like, I was almost steering in a different direction in the conversation, but maybe that didn't make sense. Yeah, I use it. Yeah, I do. I actually, I look at, I like to use the table test as, obviously the part of the first eval, but then also like during training, do we keep ranges of motion? So yeah, so I think that gets buy-in. I also will use things where, so we'll throw a medicine ball onto our roof, and it doesn't always work because obviously there's like efficiency, but a lot of times if you get a guy or a girl to do a exhale throw, like if they use the breath, the ball's going to go further. And so if it works, like there's skill in that, there's technique in that. It's not always going to work, but I would say the majority of time it will work if you're using the right weight, where they won't get it, and then okay, let's emphasize a really forceful exhale, big inhale, forceful exhale, throw that ball. Now it goes on the roof. Now you're getting buy-in, and so it works, right? Like you said, karate. It's we're using the diaphragms in coordination. There's the force coming back up. You get the deep abs. That it's low hanging fruit, man. It's like if you have a pitcher and they're trying to increase their velo. Yeah, strength matters to a certain degree, and it depends on what we're talking about. But man, I imagine I'm gonna bet that they're not breathing efficiently, and if we can teach that, and you can teach that quicker, and you get them to then coordinate their breath, use their diaphragm, use the mechanical aspect of the breathing pattern more efficiently, they're gonna increase their velo. That's huge. So yeah, I think it's a underutilized skill for sure.
I love it to teach position too. Like I got away from it from a little bit, just honestly to my own fault, where I was kind of influenced by outside people and so worried about strength. And it was like, all right, I have my model. Let me use what I know will be helpful. And it's been amazing recently with hook line, just teaching people how to hook line breathing, then progression to maybe a 90-90 and then maybe a side lying and a standing hip shift. It's like you only need 4 or 5. They can do it at home. They can do it as homework. Now, when we do a different exercise and they can just easily tuck their hips underneath them, or they can feel more abs and they can train more positions, more muscles. Now it's been amazing for recovery. It's been amazing for feeling more athletic. It's been amazing for coordination, slowing things down, truly getting the muscles, the feels that I want. And now I've seen great carryover in my game. I've seen a lot of good results with different athletes. They just feel better in positions. They feel more comfortable. And I think that's what is supposed to happen. If you can train more ranges of motion and train truly different positions with, muscle, tension and different relationships, it's been amazing. Have you dealt with any people? So in my standpoint, it's more of like in a lot of pain to feeling just better right away. So I feel more athletic from that standpoint. Have you dealt with more of those like tougher rehab patients and they've gotten an amazing result? I know we've spoken about like the great athletes, but have you dealt with or have you gotten the opportunity to help more rehab patients who need to just start hook line breathing? Here's what we're going to do. Just start super, super basic, not even worried about buy-in. Just like, let's get down and let's run through this quick.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, from a macro perspective, I think it's all about achieving a stack and then maintaining a stack and then progressing the environment, if you will, to challenge the stack and then build strength and build capacity and build speed from that position, right? That's like the general idea that I think really does work. Obviously, there's nuance to it, right? And you have crazy amounts of compensation that can be developed. And I think a lot of times a really elite athlete probably has some of the most compensation, and you can make a strong argument that maybe that's why they're so elite. But getting them, you know, I don't think it makes sense to take that in that example, the elite athlete, and just make them more compensated. That doesn't make sense. So you're trying to increase their baseline capacity to be in a good position, and then steer back to your question. I have had some extreme cases that, to be honest, like I don't. I almost want to say I'm not qualified to deal with, but then it Yeah, I am because it works. Like you get a lot of physical therapists, you get a lot of medical professionals that don't understand that basic premise of breathing patterns, compensation, and how it affects somebody's ability to move. So actually, currently, I have a lady that I've been working with that's in her 50s. She's like hypermobile, so extremely hypermobile. Did extreme yoga, like almost like contortion type yoga for a long time that just made it worse. She's had kind of chronic injury, hip, back, sciatic, all of these things that I think being too mobile and compressing, so a very very narrow frame, narrow ISA that has just done what she was naturally good at and had chronic pain. And the basic principle of teaching better breath awareness, better ability to pressurize, and then sequentially progressing that has worked. So being extremely patient with it, but looking at, starting tons of reference, bilateral, sagittal, feeling the right things, progressing it out, removing reference, increasing difficulty of managing gravity and trying to figure out how to progress that out has worked. So less pain, feels stronger, can actually find muscles that she couldn't find before, which is really cool to see it work in a scenario or in a situation that where other modalities weren't working.
I've had that happen to me too, where I'm a little hesitant, but I'm like, you know what? Let me just try my stuff. Let me just do all the basics from what I consider the basics, and let's see where we go. And we get good results just from, I guess, more of an awareness standpoint, right? You just, the person feels more comfortable, and maybe that's another way that the pain has, you know, decreased over time. So, yeah, feeling unqualified is something I could definitely relate to, where I don't, I'm not a DPT, but at the same time, I feel I feel like there would be something left on the table if I didn't at least try what I know to have helped me. I've been to so I had scoliosis when I was younger. I was a baseball player and I had shoulder pain, whatever, and then I had hip pain from you know basically my freshman year of college, all throughout my senior year, and I had uh, double labrum reconstruction my senior year. And at that point, I've been to 5 different PT clinics. I've been to people who are supposed to be amazing, and I just didn't get the help that I wanted to. So it almost feels like a disservice to not at least try what I've had work for me. And if it doesn't work, then I refer out to. I have physical therapist friends who I'd happily refer out to. And if that's what I need to do, then I'd love to. So I feel the exact same way.